meat, or if you want to go further, you could just call it plant-based proteins. And the world has recently woken up to the idea. They've been talking about mock meat as a concept for a long time, but mock meat as a healthy and more sustainable alternative, I think is a new concept. I think in the last year we've seen a lot of action around it. 2020 saw a lot of rise in the demand for protein-rich and antioxidant-rich diets. So we thought it's an apt time to do this conversation with the right set of stakeholders. So today we'll be talking about the topic. And first off, we have Shardul Davi. He's an innovation specialist with the Good Food Institute, India, which is working on creating climate resilient, robust, smart protein supply chains in India. They believe that we have a chance to leapfrog over industrial animal agriculture to produce protein that tastes the same or better and costs the same or less as animal source foods. Shardul has been instrumental in helping build the entire innovation ecosystem stack from the growth of the alternative protein sector in India. So welcome, Shardul.
Thank you so much for having me, Ramesh. It's a pleasure.
Next, we have Sairaj, and Sairaj is the founder and CEO of Wakao Foods, India's first brand that makes product from jackfruit. They are passionate about healthy, sustainable food with a goal to bring ethically sourced, sustainably grown food to the customer's dining table. They believe that good food for you is also good food for the planet. Now, the little interesting tidbit is Sairaj is a criminal lawyer, but now he's switched on to his entrepreneurship journey, a sustainable entrepreneurship, as I should say. Uh, and with sustainability and veganism being the need of the hour, Sairaj sought a solution that could mimic meat for even die-hard non-vegetarians. After a year of trials and experimentation with some of India's best chefs, he founded Wakao, a brand that is true to its vision. So welcome, Sairaj.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And finally, we have Naren. Naren is the founder and CEO of Nandu's. Folks around Bangalore, you will find a store nearby. So you will know Nandu's. And if you don't know, please do check out the website. So the company was an idea that hatched 60 years ago as an egg and chicken farm. And now they bring fresh to semi-cooked and fully cooked delicious meals retailed from their exclusive stores around Bangalore. Of course, they have an e-commerce site from where you could also order. At the last count, they had over 50 stores located across the city. So one thing I realized is that he and me both happen to be computer people. So along with that, we have a lawyer, and thankfully we have at least one food technologist on the panel. So last time around, I was running a panel on entrepreneurship, and we had all finance guys in that panel. So good to have you here, Naren.
Thank you, Ramesh.
And before we start, a little bit about myself. So I'm Ramesh Agarwal. I run Food Safety Works. We are a food safety consulting company based out of Bangalore with offices in Mumbai and Delhi. Actually, this session was supposed to be run by Surbi, but unfortunately, she's a little unwell. So I'm covering for her. And with that, we'll get started. So we'll start with Shardul. So what is this sudden hullabaloo about the mock meat market, right? How do you really define mock meat? So there's a lot of things that come under it. So let's get started with what you have to say about that.
Certainly, Ramesh. So let me get started by telling you a little bit about what plant-based meats are. Why do we usually call some of these products as for meat or mock meat, or some replications or imitations of meat products, and why people have thought of some of the imitations as the real deal, which is the plant-based meat category, for example, which will be majorly focusing on today. So largely we are talking about proteins, right? And before we begin a lot of discussion about this, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a food food technologist by education. I'm a food techno manager as well. Been working for the past 3 years at JFI India, which is a non-profit, Indian non-profit. And globally, we have a lot of international affiliates, and we essentially build the sector for alternative protein globally, or as we call it in India, the smart protein sector. And essentially, what we are trying to do here is work with our team of scientists, policymakers, entrepreneurs, investors, and everybody else on the team who's kind of expert in all of these functional area, and kind of create an entire innovation and ecosystem around this sector so that entrepreneurs or companies who want to launch products in the plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, fermentation-derived meat, eggs, and dairy, and cultivated meat, eggs, and dairy, which are the three key modalities of producing alternative proteins, is the main goal. Having said that, for the past 3 years, what I've kind of understood is that we are moving, and throughout my education in food technology, I was thinking about food systems. We are rapidly, our population is rapidly growing. And at the same time, our resources are relatively limited of producing food, including our land, the water we have, the adverse impacts on climate that we have. So the key question that we kind of battle with is how do we feed 10 billion people by 2050, 1/6 of whom are going to be Indian and half of whom are going to be Asian. So this sector essentially affects human wellness, at the same time planetary health, which is hugely important to the future of our planet. And like I said, the sector is called as alternative protein, or the smart protein sector. And like I said, the three key modalities, plant-based, fermentation-derived, and cultivated or cell-based meat, eggs, and dairy are the three key verticals. Today, we are going to largely focus on the plant-based side of things, since that is more relevant to our discussion. As the global population is increasing, this question of how do we not negatively impact climate, biodiversity, the scarce natural resources, and at the same time, we have to account for the fact that as food people involved in the food industry, currently we produce almost 10,000 trillion kilocalories per year. That's the need that everybody, all of the population currently needs. By 2050, this is going to become 16 trillion, kilocalories. So 16,000 trillion kilocalories. So essentially what's going to happen is this huge increase. At the same time, you have to also think of the fact that calories are increasing, but the protein needs are also rapidly increasing. And 80% of Indians, for example, are protein deficient, which is not a thing we usually talk about. So there are a lot of these issues. And having said that, what we have to really think about is how currently we are satisfying this protein need. Currently, we are using a system largely all over the world called animal agriculture. The situation looks a little different in India, but factory farming, animal agriculture already contributes to climate change, more than all the transportation sector emissions. 15% of climate change or, CO2 emissions is from factory farming. So think about all the cars on the road in Mumbai, Delhi, all of India, all across the world, all the flights, all the railways, all of that combined, still there's more carbon emissions from factory farming. But relatively, we see there's not a lot of dialogue about this compared to renewable energy and, other sources of energy, for example, and its impact on climate. So that's one key thing to start out with. Also, the fact that it's very inefficient system, right? When you're, for example, feeding a chicken, plants to essentially grow the chicken and then eat it, what's happening is 10 calories are being converted into 1 calorie of food for us, 10 calories of feed. That's a really, inherently inefficient system. And at the same time, then when you multiply it by the number of animals that we currently, use in factory farming, that kind of really, it really puts off the equation. Having said that, 75% of all agricultural land is currently used by livestock, and rest of the 25% is used for growing crops, out of which again we feed a lot to animals in the first place, and 75% of the agricultural land currently for humans is giving only 1/3 of the global protein supply. So clearly people are dying hungry. There's a lot of food wastage, but we are not thinking about the wastage of food in the production system itself, right? So that's the overall angle. And having said that, the global consumption of meat is rapidly increasing. By 2050, it's going to increase by 50 to 70%, almost going to double. And at the same time, like you saw, we don't have many ways of feeding meat, eggs, and dairy, which is what people are going to want to eat going forward because it's aspirational food. So that's how plant-based meat as a technology, or cultivated and fermentation meat, eggs, and dairy as a technology is different from mock meat. Mock meat is, think about soya chunks, right? In 1990s, 1980s, or even globally, bunch of veggie burgers, for meat burgers were present for past 70 years in many cultures in China. Seitan, tofu, a lot of these products are also considered as mock meat or imitation meats. And these are great, much more sustainable compared to their conventional animal counterparts. And over time, this category is also going to grow. These categories are for vegans or vegetarians, for example, because they largely want to eat high protein diets, which does not necessarily replicate the taste of meat, eggs, and dairy. So having said all of this, let me quickly tie it up and say that essentially a lot of this sector started out 12 years ago when Beyond Meat first started launching some of its product back in 2009. And since then, there are more than 800 companies now globally, and we've come a long way. So very excited to talk about what plant-based meats are and other sources of alternative meat. Yeah.
Thank you, Shardul. So I think it was good to kind of get it categorized as three sets of categories when we talk about plant-based proteins or mock meat in general. So just a follow-on question onto that for Sairaj. So we talked about there is cultured or a lab-grown meat, right, which is slightly different from the plant-based meat. Now, Shardul, you also talked about the fact that tofu has been quite a significant uh, space. So tofu pretty much occupied the whole space before other alternative sources came along. I remember the only completely vegetarian place in Beijing I had been to used tofu, and they made it look like all kind of things. Of course, I had my problem with that. I was not looking for a meat replacement. I was looking for something vegetarian, but that is what was on offer. So the tofu was there, and suddenly we kind of jumped from tofu to all of these other alternatives. Sairaj, you want to kind of share some insights into what made this jump, or what is different between cultured meat? Because about a couple of years ago, we were all talking about only cultured meat, right? And then now we're talking about plant-based
Right.
meat alternatives. So your thoughts on what and why and how, etc.
Yeah. So thanks, Ramesh. So one thing that Waka was built on a foundation of three main pillars. One was that the products have to be cruelty free. So all our products will be vegan. Second is that the products have to be tasty and aesthetically good. And the third is that the product should be good for your health and for the nature around you. So having said that, we will never get into a lab-based culture. What we give is jackfruit. So when we started with Waka, we never had the intention of it being a mock meat or being a plant-based alternative. We were making products out of jackfruit. Waka is a jackfruit company. So now what happens is we don't make the texture of jackfruit. The jackfruit has a meaty texture, which makes it naturally a great alternative. So my idea was always to come up with a product which any living human being on planet Earth can consume without it being against his culture, his morals, or against anything bad for the nature. So jackfruit, if you can make jackfruit in an avatar which satisfies your taste buds of a meat replacement, superb. So that's where once we got into this whole ecosystem, we realized that we have something which has tremendous potential. One is because it has amazing nutrient values, and the second is it has a crazy texture. So I'm a meat eater. So Goans are all meat eaters. So now we are making that shift, and we're trying to move towards more sustainable lifestyle. I realized that this is so close. So people keep asking me how close is it to the real deal. I said this is the closest a fruit can get in its natural form to the real deal. Therefore, we are not into the cultured meat category because I realized that those are lab made. That's someday not going to be good for your health because there will be something which is injected into it. A lot of things are done to get it in that shape. So we are into providing natural solutions. And that's where Wakao comes in play. And we say that, so today, a lot of hotels, a lot of chains, right from Oberoi's to Hilton to Grand Hyatt to W, use our product to make a lot of dishes. So I'll give you an example. Grand Hyatt makes a lot of katal biryani from our product. So that is a mock meat substitute. It's like a substitute, right? So we don't want to categorize ourselves and say that we will only provide mock meat to the non-vegetarians. No, jackfruit is a tremendous fruit. It's an amazing fruit which everybody should eat. Therefore, we want to give an option to the entire population to use it in the way they like. So a vegetarian can make a sabzi out of it. A non-vegetarian can make a biryani out of it, can make a chili chicken kind of replacement out of it. It's superb. Anything can be made out of it. So that's where I feel that Wakao is going to create a different market segment in this whole mock meat thing. where people are looking for meat alternatives, but they'll realize that they have a product which can be made into so many different things. You can make a sweet dish out of it. You can make a non-veg dish out of it. You can make a vegetarian dish out of it. So I am of the opinion that cultured meat and meats which are made in the lab may work in the international market, because they don't have. So if a vegetarian, for example, you ask a vegetarian to eat a meat, a product which is called meat, they will be averse. They will run away. They'll say, "Nahi, mujhe aapko malum hoga." They'll say that we don't want to. It's a psychological thing. It's not a real thing. It's just a psychological thing. So in the West, this may work really well, but in India, we need a more inclusive approach. And my whole approach has been to give people an option. I'm not being judgmental. I don't say that yehi karo ya wohi karo. But if you want to move to the other side, we have an alternative for you, which can be very close to what you like to eat normally. So try it out. So that's our approach to the whole thing.
So that is fantastic. I know when we posted our event, and in some of the conversations there were comment about why even call it meat, right? So it's really vegetarian. So meat has a non-vegetarian context to
I'll
it.
just give you an example, Ramesh, if I can just interrupt you for a minute.
Sure.
An example of what happened with, there was one article which went viral on the Better India, and about our company and about us. And there was a Hindi version, which I found a month later on Facebook. And those comments that I read, and the article said that it was speaking about kathal ka meat. In Hindi, they said kathal meat. And the other comments that I read were really heart-wrenching. People were abusing. They said, why are you calling our sacred fruit kathal a meat? So, people have that opinion also in India. India is a very wide country where you have different opinions. People don't want their fruit to be positioned that way also. And said, therefore, we have a more inclusive approach.
Great. Yeah, I think cultural contexts are important, and we all know food is a very, very cultural thing. So what might work in one culture may not really work onto another culture. So great. Now moving on to you, Naren. Of course, you have no qualms about it. You are a meat person, and you've been so far all all out meat person. So just a kind of question to trigger thoughts is it, do you think uh, the mock meat or the meat replacement or the imitation meat, is it really a big deal, or is it one of those fads that you think will go away and it'll get lost?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ramesh. I was very impressed with what Sairaj has to say regarding how to position this product, and I concur with a lot of what he says. So, just to give you a little bit of a background, we are a poultry company. We've been poultry company since the early '60s. So, very rich heritage in poultry farming. Now, see, whatever is applied in the international markets is actually not applicable to India, in a sense, right? When they talk about greenhouse emissions from factory farming, a lot of the factory farmed animals in the West is either pork or beef. So these are heavy on the environment. There's no doubt about it. 70% of all land produced materials like soya, corn goes into animal feed. There's no doubt about it, right? But where we are in India is predominantly a poultry meat eating country. They don't consume pork as much. They don't consume beef as much. So in that sense, the footprint of the animal industry in the Indian context is much lesser. But I've always been a sustainability activist. Okay, for me, it's not about poultry industry or the transportation industry or any other industry wanting to have a smaller footprint. I feel every industry has a role to play, and they have a responsibility to the environment, right? So it's not business as usual. You have to, whether even if you are making sweets and selling sweets through a retail outlet, you have to think about sustainable ways of doing it. So we started our sustainable journey 10 years ago, where we looked at our footprint of our facilities. We produce close to 4 million chicken a month with farms across, close to about 20 farms across the entire south of India and Maharashtra. right? So we said, what is our environmental footprint? We are producing, millions of chicken. How do we, put less pressure on the environment? So that's when we got into solar. 10 years ago, when we started solarizing all our farms and everything else, people thought I was nuts, right? Because poultry has got, it's a high volume, low margin business. But then, this guy must be getting 2 chicks out of 1 egg. So that's why probably he can afford, solar, biogas, and all of these sustainable talk. But if you are in the business for the long term, I think any entrepreneur, any business guy has to understand that every practice has to be sustainable. So we are today we have most of our farms are off grid. They run on solar. We use biogas. Where we were using thousands and thousands of liters of diesel to keep these facilities going, we have completely switched to solar, right? So that's our, so factory farming in all is not bad, because it is required to feed a large population, right? But how do you do it sustainably? That is critical, right? At Nandu's, whatever we produce is cage free, right? We don't use any hormones, steroids, antibiotics at all. We grow close to 1 million birds a month without without the use of antibiotics. So the challenge here is not this protein versus that protein. Whatever protein you're producing, how do you do it sustainably, right? So that is the key for me. Now, coming to your question, regarding plant protein being, see, I have an issue with calling a fantastic ingredient as mock meat. I think people are doing a disservice when they take this ingredient, make products, and call it as a meat replacement. 80% of India is protein deficient. Okay, it's very simple. Most people who are vegetarians are actually protein deficient. Non-vegetarians, not so much, but a large portion of the population is protein deficient. Now, if you have this beautiful product, of course, it is. I feel it is uber processed, but if you have this product, I think by trying to replace meat, I don't think it's working. I feel the way to position it as an ingredient per se, like Siraj was saying, I'm jackfruit. I don't care whether it's a meat replacement or a plant protein, whatever you call it. We are an ingredient. Out of these ingredients, I'm making products, and that will give you protein. That, I think, is the right way to position it, right? Because if you went to a non-vegetarian and told him that I'll replace your chicken with plant-based protein, I don't think he's interested. At least not where he stands with his food evolution, especially in India. Okay. Now, when you look west or to more matured markets, the consumer is evolved. He understands so many things, and he's on a certain, he's at a certain place and time in his food journey that he prefers these kind of products, right? But in India, chicken is an aspirational meat. It is growing at around 8 to 10% consumption. It's going to double by in the next decade or so. Now, when there is so much demand there, positioning a product is very critical. So my suggestion is, it is here to stay, right? I'm not saying it's a fad. I think it's here to stay, but it deserves its place in the limelight. I feel the ingredient has to be recognized. Products have to be made out of it, and those products have to be branded as protein products, or call it samosa and say protein rich samosa. Call it vada, protein rich vada. You make products out of this fantastic ingredient, but when you start saying that this is a meat replacement, it's a disservice to such a fantastic ingredient. That's my 2 cents about it.
Great. So I think one of the themes that which has emerged is that culturally it does not sort of make sense to call it mock meat. So that's a fair point.
Ramesh, just one point I wanted to add. See, I
Mhm.
had this dilemma, and I was on another forum. Generally, we meat producers get bashed up in all the forums, all the plant-based protein forums. But I was talking at a forum in Singapore, and I was the only one, and everybody was plant-based protein. They would just want to kind of replace the meat guy with plant protein. So I actually ran an interesting poll on my LinkedIn profile, where I posed this question. I said, how many of you vegetarians like to hear plant chicken nugget? 70% of the people came back and said, I'm a vegetarian. I don't want any reference to meat in the product that you're selling me. So please don't call it vegan chicken nugget. There is no vegan chicken nugget, right? It's plant protein. You don't meat comes from animal sources. It doesn't come from plant source, right? So 70% of the people came back and said, we don't like the name. You call it what it is. You call it protein nuggets. You call it protein samosa. You call it protein nuggets, whatever else. But please don't use meat in it. The word meat, like you said, you went to China and you just didn't like the name or form or shape of it. You just wanted to eat vegetarian, right? So that's the interesting finding I thought I'll share with you guys.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And my personal opinion is, I think a lot of people call it meat so that they could charge a premium for it, honestly, right? Nobody really pays for veggies and stuff. But as soon as you call it meat, we are talking about a product which is 400 rupees kg versus if I were to call it jackfruit, I'm sure Sairaj struggles with that. Saying, jackfruit, 20 rupees a kg. Why are you charging me 45 rupees or whatever for a burger patty or something, right? So I think
I can tell you why I'm charging, how much I'm charging. I can tell you why without it being a fad.
I'm sure there is a reason for it, but I'm just saying from a customer point of view, it's a very logical question, and Indians have this knack of doing back of the envelope calculations, saying, "Oh, chicken is 400 rupees a kg, and now here is jackfruit, and you are saying that I have to pay the same price as chicken," and I'm sure the costs are there, and that's why the pricing is like that. But to me, that may kind of explain a little bit, at least in the West. I think that is probably what drives the naming convention. Of course, also the dominant side of the market is non-vegetarian market. So I think from whatever little I have interacted with them, it's almost like they cannot understand how you could eat anything that is not meat, right? So the first question when they meet a vegetarian is like, "Oh, you have vegetarian, as in you don't eat meat, then what do you eat?" So that's the usual question that they run into. So continuing with the discussion on, I think some points that we quickly touched upon around the meat industry and the per capita consumption. So we, like everybody's been saying, we are the second lowest rates of meat consumption per person, right? So we are at about 4.4 kgs per capita. Considering that, really, again, back to the question saying, are plant-based proteins or mock meat or some of these products that we are making, are they really a priority? Don't we have headroom for the meat to kind of grow still? Because I think Naren pointed out, there is very little meat production that's happening in India compared to the Western world. So don't we have the headroom? So that's the question for Shardul.
Sure. I'd love to start out with some misconceptions, right? So, for example, who these products are for, I started with that. It's for hardcore non-vegetarians, flexitarians, which are driving 90% of these sales of these products. So these are not for vegans or vegetarians. That we've been clear about very, very clearly for the longest of time. And I think globally, the market understands this very well, because all the data, whether it's a public listed companies or other companies, 90% of almost all of their customers are not vegetarians or vegans. Country like India, I think there's a very big misconception in our country that India is largely a vegetarian country. When it comes to numbers, you're very correct. 4.5 kg, by the way, that is 2000 year data. It has further come down a little bit, and that's because the number of population that increased in the past 20 years, that's huge. And when you multiply 4.5 by 130 crores, the amount is insane, right? Just multiply it. It's huge amount of meat consumed and produced every year. So I think that's a big misconception that we don't produce enough meat in our country, or we are not consuming enough meat in our country. Now think about India, right? When we talk about India, what really are we talking about when we say India? If you consider the metro cities and if you consider the upwardly mobile cohort like me, college educated, more than 50,000 income, almost 7 to 10 crore people who are there in tier 1 cities in our country, they consume a lot of things like OTT platforms, Spotify subscriptions, meat, like their global counterparts. They want snackable options, fast options. A lot of it is rapidly growing. And we are talking about 2050. if we don't lay out, better systems now in place for 2050, we are going to be at place where the West has. The good thing is we don't consume so much meat. We haven't invested billions of dollars, trillions of dollars in establishing an infrastructure of value chain abattoirs yet. We are rapidly doing it, which is another great indication of why the production is going up very rapidly, right? And again, coming back to Sairaj's point, so because vegans or vegetarians are not the main consumers, that's why I started out by clarifying that plant-based meat as a technology term and as a category in itself is very different from farm meat or high vegetarian protein categories. So the whole point is that category is going to grow, like great crops like jackfruit, which are great for water, sustainable, hardy. Again, a little less protein, but high in other nutritional sources. So pulses, millets, which are local hardy crops, and we are one of the largest, so many biodiverse zone, largest producer of all of these pulses, millets, but there's no value addition to it per se. And the problem is the meat consumption is going to grow up by 2050. And how do you feed it sustainability without repeating the mistakes? So I think the latent driver indicators are there. So for example, 20 years ago in a country like China, though culture is a big factor, right? But what does the hard data say? For example, the largest consumption of poultry over the next 20, 30 years, and this is FAO UN data, is going to come from India, the largest chicken growth, poultry growth. And these are hard facts, right? So the point is that there's a huge consumption of meat, though the number on per capita is less. And the point is to make replacement products which are organoleptically the exactly same. So about what Narendra mentioned about the survey. So I saw that poll as well, and like 70 or we ran huge surveys in metro cities. 60% of almost 80% of the surveyed people in this 7 to 10 crore worth of upwardly mobile early adopter cohort, which is the main market for the sector in the shorter term, kind of is very open to trying plant-based meat. And I can send you a lot of these studies as well, Narendra, as a follow-up, and a lot of data that is gathered around this. And that was done in 2018, 2019, 2020 by multiple other organizations as well, not just GFI. And kind of that same number of 73% of vegetarians, 63% of vegetarians wanting to try it in this, non-vegetarians wanting to try it in this early adopter cohort was kind of validated time and again. So that's just a quick address to all the, some of the misconceptions that we initially started out with. So this sector and the topic of discussion is quite different from the high vegetarian protein category in the first place, right? Which will keep growing. Vegetarians, vegans who are protein deficient will keep consuming those. There's no agenda of replicating meat, eggs, and dairy, right? But no meat, eggs, or dairy eater is going to shift away unless you exactly give the taste, functional properties, texture, the sensory properties, the flavor, all of it. And this has been time and again seen for the past 12 years, right? And to your earlier question also, Ramesh, so just to quickly address the difference between the three categories. So cultivated meat or cell cultured meat, which is also sometimes termed as lab grown meat, is essentially from cell lines. So you take the cell lines, the animal does not die, and you're cultivating those cell lines to become cell mass. This is food technology. Plant-based meat is very different category. That's why I said today we are going to focus only on plant-based side of things. Plant-based diet, like FSSAI, for example, recently said, is a key element of sustainably feeding Indians and having a sustainable growth over the next 20 years. So fermentation is similarly done from microbes, but we didn't go into a lot of technology for those other two categories. So that's plant-based meat. And now answering the earlier question of why it might be not just a trend or a fad. Why is it an absolute shift? And I'll kind of agree with Narendra when he said that it's here to stay, because look at this, like the largest 15 of top 20 food companies, and I understand some of this is global, is just that a lot of this started very late in India. We don't process a lot of our food. There's not enough food technology. And this forum is for food technologists, for example, in the audience. We know about the state of infrastructure, including universities, large-scale co-manufacturing facilities. I'm sure Sairaj and Narendra, being food entrepreneurs, have experienced a lot of that. So it's going to be a while, but I think we have seen a massive amount of growth. So when I started out, there were only Good Dot and Good Milk making plant-based meat and plant-based dairy respectively, right? Over the past 3 years, there have been more than 100 entrepreneur startups that have gone through our ecosystem. There are currently 700 members, and I think 3-4 dozen companies are currently working on products, and at least a dozen of them are already in the market, and more so are going to come. So for example, Blue Tribe Foods or Imagine Meats by Ritesh and Janelia Deshmukh. These are plant-based meat companies. There are many more plant-based meat companies like Good Dot, which have been now selling in 40 different countries. So to your earlier point about short-term demand and local consumption, right? Why not make in India, supply for the world? There's this huge rapid demand. We already know the huge meat consumption everywhere. Why can't we export to European countries, North American countries, South African countries in the meanwhile, using our local talent pool, all this immense biodiversity of crops? That's why our mission in India is a little different as well, right? Because you have to think about farmers, their value-added incomes. For example, that has been the biggest challenge for all the governments, including a lot of public policy stakeholders. How do you increase that? Currently, if you give them more diverse sources of streams of income, and all of this is kind of tied up as climate changes, land use is going to change, they're going to overly even livestock farmers, for example, we are not talking about people involved in slaughter, for example, they have only one source of income currently, like animal husbandry. Largely, they do some stuff, substantial stuff on the side. So I've lived in villages all over India. I've seen a lot of these practices being played out. I was under, NIFTIM, so Ministry of Food Processing Industries, FSSAI. I've been consuming a lot of that. So I think overall, I think there's an urgent need. And in the overall point, we kind of miss that, what we were talking about. Now, coming back, why this is, I think this is here to stay. Like biggest 15 of the 20 companies, Nestle, Unilever's, KFC's, Burger King's. KFC is known for meat, right? Starbucks, Kroger's, the biggest meat companies, in fact, in the world, Tyson, JBS, Marfrig, they are the ones quite heavily invested in this, because Tyson CEO, for example, said a couple of years ago that essentially we are not a meat company, right? We are a protein company. The end goal is to give people protein, right? That's the end goal. Like Narendra was telling us about him being a food platform. So the end goal is not to give people meat per se, but the way people are used to consuming high protein, which is bioavailable in a form which is more palatable to them, because they want to make better choices for environment, for land use, water use, all of that. So that's the overall goal. And I think like I said, the misconception is pretty drastic, because a government level survey was done all over India. And 72% of Indians are self-reported non-vegetarians when you include egg in it. And yeah, a bunch of success of meat companies, including that of, for example, Nandu's, Licious, we can see that the meat demand is certainly growing up, and there are a lot of scope for both of these categories to coexist and rapidly grow to fulfill this demand sustainably by 2050. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I think a lot of data that I'm sure people are catching, and I'm confident they're going to come back and rewind it and play it and kind of rerun, because I think all of them are very fair points. So we do need it, and we do. When you multiply, like you said, the number with a population size or the urban pattern. So India is clearly split into the cities and the rural area, right? And the cities and the mega cities are now driving most of the consumption. So yes, if you were to factor that
Sorry, in just 30 seconds, quickly adding a point you were mentioning, Ramesh, about the price parity, right? You're very correct. That's why price, taste, convenience. You mentioned this in the introduction. Make it taste the same or better, cost it same or less. That's the whole agenda of GFI and the theory of change for the larger sector as well. Because unless you do that, until you keep selling it, you're not going to tap into the larger Bharat, right? Bottom of pyramid, tier 2, tier 3 cities, nobody's going to buy it. People will settle for soy chunks or, high protein vegetarian diets. Again, these are larger issues through midday meals and government schemes that you have to provide protein to people. If you look at the marginalized population who might consider meat as aspirational food in developing parts of India, they definitely want to consume meat. So it should taste like meat, because people eat meat because it's so yummy. That's why people cannot leave it, right? It's yummy. It has fat. It has great aroma. So that's why it's very difficult to shift away. That's why there's a people who are vegans and vegetarians, they're going to consume anything for that matter, which does not taste like meat, eggs, or dairy in the first place, because they didn't want to in the first place. Yeah.
Right. So we'll continue the theme on the taste. Now, so the next question over to Sairaj is, since taste is like the supreme, right? As in, unless it tastes great, it is not going to sell. So how do you manage that, right? Saying great product, great ingredient, great texture, but it should taste like meat. Or that's I know you told me that it does not have to taste like meat. At least you are not focusing on that.
I'll tell you how it works. So like I said in my initial first introduction, that one of the pillars on which our company is founded is that it has to taste good. No one's here it's not a medicine. No one's going to eat something. If you tell me you're going to give me 200 grams of protein, also I'm not going to eat it if it tastes like a medicine, right? So the idea here, so we have in our company, we have two different channels of products. So we have we have ready to eats, and we have ready to cook products. So what are we giving you? In the ready to eat, we have flavors which are curated with a lot of pain. So we have food technologists like Shardul. We have people who understand what. So another challenge that we have is our products are all vegan. So if we have to make a butter jack, so a butter jack will not taste like a normal butter chicken or a makhni because it has no butter. Okay, so we are using ingredients which are vegan, but yet we are trying to make it tasty. So we have a lot of consultants who put in a lot of it. It's not mine. I just taste it and I say, okay, this is close. This is like, because I know it, because I've been eating it. So I know this is okay. Ye nazdik aa raha hai. This is good. I'm enjoying this taste. So I know what people want, because when we make products, like we have a teriyaki, we have a barbecue, and we have a butter jack. Now, if you see very closely, all these three products have variants in vegetarian and non-vegetarian. So you can have a barbecue chicken also, and you can have a barbecue paneer also. So now what happens with the texture? Our game is with the texture. So our main product, and the product which sells the most, is the burger patty. And the second most, and which goes in the industrial segment, is the raw jack. What is raw jackfruit? Raw jackfruit is like raw chicken. Like if you order from Nandu's tomorrow, that's why I was telling Naren, you can sell raw jackfruit on his platform. Because if you order, like it's just like ordering chicken or mutton. It's what you cook out of it. So when we give a Grand Hyatt, we don't make it and give it to him. We give him the raw jackfruit. So the hero of our product is its texture. So jackfruit again is taste-wise is more like, I don't know if a non-vegetarian have eaten a basa fish. It doesn't have a great taste of its own. It takes the flavor and the spices of whatever you cook it in. So you can very easily make a jackfruit into a product which is great for hardcore non-vegetarians. Trust me when I say that. I have given jackfruit products to hardcore non-vegetarians made by our cooks in our hotel. Simple cooks, not some big hi-fi chefs. They've made simple things like a biryani, like chili, Chinese chili. Taste crazy. We are coming up with another two products in very soon, which is going to storm the market. I'm telling you, they're going to be ready to eat meals like a biryani, like a Rogan Josh. Outstanding. You'll love the taste. So when I say taste, a lot of work goes into it. It's not easy. Trust me. It's not like you just make something and you sell it and then a lot of people are going to like it. We get a lot of bashing also. Some people may not like it. You can't please everybody. It's subjective. Taste is again subjective on a larger level. Something that I really love, other person may not like. So it is something we are learning. It's an ongoing process. You have to keep on changing. You have to keep on improving with your flavors and the things. But at the same time, let me say the burger patty, why it's such a hit. And when it comes to even the non-vegetarians, because firstly, it is minced. We use in our burger patty 90% jackfruit. So it is a meaty, chunky patty. It's a 150-gram patty, which has a very meaty bite. So in a patty, in a burger, even in a veg burger, you never have any pieces unless you're having a cutlet, which is like a potato cutlet. But when you're having a burger, a vegetarian meaty burger, you don't actually find out what is there inside. It is all on the taste. So at the end of the day, how you cook that burger, what sauces you put in it, how you make it out, we give you a patty. You have to then make your burger out of it. So so we are not giving you a final product. So I always keep saying that we are an ingredient. We are not the final product. You have to make the final product. So Ramesh, if I send you a packet, I send you a packet of say barbecue jack. So as is barbecue jack, you can make an amazing Frankie out of it without feeling ki ye kya non-veg hai ya kya hai. You'll still enjoy it. But if I send that same packet to even Narendra, he can also make a great kasdi out of it and say that, wow, this is very close. Yaar, ye maza aa gaya kha ke. So it's how they prepare in their culture, how their household prepares it, gives it that whole finishing, So I'm very clear with one thing that I agree with Shardul that taste is very important. And if we have to move the non-vegetarians off the borderline to trying something which is very close, we need to give them good taste. We need to give them more meatiness. And for us, luckily in the sense we've thought over it and we've done so much research in it. Jackfruit has an amazing texture and it is very, very close. It is very close to the real deal. And therefore, it's a great alternative to chicken or to mutton. In West Bengal, jackfruit biryani is called mutton ki biryani They eat it as a replacement for mutton. It's eaten huge. So like I always keep telling this, I got introduced to jackfruit by my grandmother because we were cheated into eating it. They used to call it chikanachi bhaji. So in Konkani it's called chikanachi bhaji. It means it translates into chicken ki bhaji. तो जब हमें वेज खिलाना होता था ये चुरा के खिलाते थे कि ये देखो दिस इज चिकन की भाजी और हम खा लेते थे. So it is that close, and it's not कि आजकल का concept है. This is a concept which has been going on for generations. Just today we've understood it and we are putting it into words and we are calling it कि अरे हाँ ये mock meat है या plant based है या जो भी है. But this is something that has always been there because it has a natural texture and qualities of being very close to meat. Yeah.
Great. I'm sure your products are going to be off the shelf now with with such a fantastic pitch that you've made. And folks who are tuned in, if you have experiences, please feel free to share with everybody as to what you think. And the follow-on question is also on taste. Now, this time to the meat person. So, Naren, have you tried any of this? Have you compared some of this? What is your take on the taste versus texture versus will it ever kind of replace it, make it? What do you think?
Yeah, I think taste is key. Food is all about taste, right? Even on our platform, although we have about 35 different products, we have an entire R&D team of about 50 people working on new product developments, etc. All meat based, basically mutton, fish, and chicken. So the most sold product is chicken nuggets and chicken popcorn. Okay, both are breaded products which need to be fried. So, a large portion of the population, again, I go back to where the population is on their food evolution curve. A large set of the Indian population still is not massively evolved. Of course, in the urban centers, like Shardul was saying, there's a large consumer set that is evolved. They want, marinated options where they can grill it, etc. But surprisingly, taste and some traditional habits of frying and having that fat and still works. And taste is key. Now, coming back to me having tasted any of these plant protein products, I have, and some of the products that I have tasted, absolutely stunning, right? They are exactly like meat, in terms of taste, feel, texture. They're incredibly close to meat, right? You can't, I'm a non-vegetarian. I have two carnivores at home, and both my boys are literally non-vegetarians. They could make out a difference, right? So it's coming very close to meat, and the only thing is there's room for everybody. There has to be a very like Shardul was saying, there are lots of companies that are actually putting out plant-based protein products. My only observation there is you have to be very clear about the product and market fit. Okay, if you go into rural India and try to tell him that hey, this is plant-based meat, he'll say, I don't know what that is. I know chicken. See, the guy is actually graduating to real meat. You can't graduate him to plant meat straight away. So understanding where your product sells, who's your target audience is key. But I'm a big believer in plant protein as well. Now, in terms of sustainability, my observation is some of these products are uber processed. Okay, protein has to be extracted from these grains. Then further processing has to be done to bring up the texture, taste, feel, the smell, and all of that stuff. So it requires some amount of uber processing. So what we have done at Nandu's and our poultry farming activity, we have actually leapfrogged the protein, plant-based protein as a solution, and we have gone straight to insect protein. Okay, so insect protein is emerging. A new field of culinary sciences called entomography is emerging. Most of Asia already eat insects. India, there's a yucky factor around insects, but it'll come around, right? So our first effort towards sustainable practices for animal farming has been around replacing the soya protein that we use for animal farming and replacing fish meal in fish feed. We use, I have another company called Insectify. We are a circular economy company where we actually work with the local governments, take off the wet waste from them, feed it. In fact, all of the meat that is expired out of Nandus is sent to Insectify, and Insectify consumes it, and we produce protein from an insect larvae called black soldier fly. So at the moment, we are the largest producer of BSF in the country. Our trials are on for poultry, and fish trials are going to start soon. This is sustainability, right? Like you're talking about a circular economy solution that solves your garbage problem, that produces manure out of the wet waste. It produces insect oil. It produces insect protein. That protein comes back into animal feed. And I suspect and I predict that in the next 10 years, populations are going to be quite comfortable with insect protein. There is cricket protein, there is BSF protein, and EU is already permitted, given certain sources of waste that goes into processing. EU is already permitted use of insect protein for animal food. So if I actually want to take a regular cookie and enhance it with protein, we just drop in some insect protein powder in there, and it works. Nobody even knows. And they don't see, there's that yucky factor about crawling worm. But then if it is a powder and it's added to your food and enhances your protein intake, phenomenal. So I see that happening, very, very fast, right? Then again, it's an ingredient. Taste is critical. You have to build products around it. That is what I feel will succeed. Taste, quality, traceability, transparency, and regional cuisine, right? It has to be very regional. Indians are so regional. A lot of our products is chicken 65, Rayalaseema chicken. That is what sells. And of course, where you target makes a difference. We target the mid and the lower segment, SEC B plus, B, and some parts of C. A also works, but the A pluses are evolved to have chicken stroganoff, right? But that won't sell in the B. So you got to kind of understand where the market is, and taste is very critical, though.
Fantastic. I think a good turning point at this point in time, and moving on to sustainability. So very interesting point about what sustainability really means, and how we could incorporate some of it in our traditional systems. And the next question is very similar in nature, and that's for Shardul, is animals have been an integrated part of our farming systems, right? So they've always been there. From a little bit of agriculture that I dab with, we do realize that animals are integral. Without that, farming tends to become incomplete or too hard. So I don't have to feed the chickens, right? So I just have some chickens, they'll go eat the insects in a direction that Naren was also pointing out. And it helps my farm because it removes the pests and I get chicken for free. So if we were to consider in that angle, there is a fair amount of sustainability in the meat and animal husbandry and all of that. So how do we compare really with, let's say, if we were to go back to that system of farming, and then we were talking about plant-based proteins or mock meat, because both require resources, right? In the end, we are all talking about how much resource are we consuming. So in that sense, how do you see that being more sustainable or less sustainable, or how are they comparable?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the larger argument here is let's go back to the good old ways, right? And I think we hear that all the time. Unfortunately, both for organic and a lot of this, like think about the number of farms there are and the number of animals there were, 50 years ago, and how many animals there are now. So the larger question here is that the normal balance that, like, for example, I'll give you some numbers. Like, again, I'm fond of numbers because they kind of really bring us to the point. For example, last year, we slaughtered almost 80 to 100 land billion animals for our food needs, right? And that's going to happen every single year. And that's not even including the seafood and the massive tons of, billions of tons of cash that we basically take out of oceans, which is not being fulfilled at the rate. And we all know, the scenario with the coastal lines and the biodiverse coral regions and all of that. It's a species loss, it's a biodiversity loss. I think people are mostly confused by understanding that we live in a world where animals are in the wild and few animals are there on the farms. The concept of factory farming, and like we discussed earlier, right, it's not very apparent in India right now, but if you speak to major manufacturers who install a lot of for example cages for large factory farms for chicken or for any other goats, for anything else, they'll tell you that the demand for next 20 years is booked up. So we are talking about the future. And like I said, we have come a long way. Like our population itself has doubled in the past 20 years. And when you compare that to this, area where the numbers don't add up anymore to go back to sustainability, the larger argument is let's convert all of our land to organic, right? But we talked about some of these things. 73% of our land is currently going to livestock. Only 25% of our land is being used globally to grow crops. And those numbers also relatively true for a country like India. And only as the numbers grow up, those things will become even more, polarized. That's why there has to be multiple solutions, like Narendra said. Conventional meat industry going to more conventional routes. So, for example, when he talked about insect protein, it's definitely much more sustainable step for him. Rather than using animal feed, you're using insect meats to feed. So it's relatively much, because insects, carbon emissions, all of that is much better. But from our perspective, for example, insects is just an intermediary better step, because you're still having an intermediary to producing protein, right? Ultimately, plants are the most efficient in converting it. So insects is still one step removed from the whole process, right? So that's my overall view about sustainability. But bringing back like some of these things, chicken as a animal gives out 40 times more carbon dioxide than a per calorie of lentil when you compare the same. So obviously there's no comparison directly between the two. The animal has to breathe, has to grow a lot of organs, a lot of that stuff. The fundamental problem is there in the system. Having said that, we can always try to, all the stakeholders have to make it more sustainable, and the demand's going to be so huge over the next 30 years that I think everybody will have a very big amount of market to play in, really. And then again, we didn't even talk about a lot of antibiotic use. Like Narendra rightly said, we don't have those numbers for India, because in our country, if you talk to veterinarians, you won't really realize where the whole thing is going. But at least I know for the US that 75%, almost 60 to 75% of all the medical antibiotics that are produced are fed to animals. So essentially, that means that there's a huge risk by antibiotic resistant bacteria in the next 20 years. And it's very easy to kind of see that point. Maybe 2 years ago it wasn't, but we are currently living in the midst of a pandemic, and how it completely changes everything, whether it's zoonotic or not, that's a separate question. But so many experts all over the world have said over the next 20 years, there are going to be so many antibiotic resistant bacteria, which are going to have a toll on a lot of these things. Having said that, I think from a sustainability perspective, also look at, for example, swine flus or bird flus, right? Rampant, decimating millions of pigs in China and many other countries. Even in India, recently it happened. The larger question is, there were a lot of misinformation about it going on as well when you relate it to consumption of food. But the larger question is the person who invested, in bird farm or whatever, as a farmer or as an entrepreneur, they have a huge loss, because this is going to keep happening over the next 20 years. So there has to be more stable, so that also factors into sustainability. I have just one more final point. So, for example, having said all of this, and it's worth repeating, right? Just because we haven't mapped a lot of this, there are expert studies, life cycle analysis, techno-economic analysis about all of these sectors, whether it's cultivated meat, plant-based meat. Some of these plant-based meat products, for example, are 100% less land use requiring, 100% sometimes less water use requiring when you make the same end 1 kg of. So, for example, 1 kg of beef takes 17,000 liters of water to produce, right? And when you make it from plants, it's just few hundred liters. It's drastically less for chicken, for example, but it's still in a spectrum when you're using animals. So that's the larger point when it comes to sustainability, I think. I think by 2050, it's going to be X plus Y plus Z plus R, where, R is going to be conventional animal meat, and X plus Y plus Z are going to be these 3 categories. And what we're trying to do is find a good sustainable balance for all of the 4 categories, so that the pressures on the world are not so overwhelmed in terms of sustainability that we are in a bad place as humanity and as a race. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think you made a very strong case. I don't think we can refute any of your point. Continuing the discussion, so moving from sustainability to nutrition, right? So we are trying to look at a replacement nutrition. So one of the things that I think Naren brought up in between, and we've heard every health professional talk about, is the fact that these tend to be ultra processed, right? I think Sairaj did talk about his products or not, but in the category in general, there is a lot of ultra processing that happens, and there is also excess salt which gets added. So how do you see that really being healthy? So Sairaj, you want to comment?
So what has happened, and more so because of the pandemic also now, is everybody is very conscious of what's getting on their plate. So people want to know what's in the product, what are the processes, how are you making it. So processed food in itself is not something that a lot of people are fond of. They don't like processed food in any form. So while we were making, we know, and I know of a lot of companies who are processing it to an extent which it is not actually healthy at the end of the day, but yet it is passing off in the whole halla gulla, like we say. So as a company and as the ethos that we are built on, I would never make something that I'm not comfortable feeding my son. So I'm very clear about some things, some ethos that we are very clear. So our product is very little processed. We do, and we are very open about our technology, what we are doing. So it's a simple technology of retort packaging that we use. So there are zero preservatives. I repeat, zero preservatives in our product. There are no preservatives. So the product is, so that I keep saying this again and again. We don't need to do anything to make our product meaty. Like I remember Naren mentioning that people use things to make the product meaty. We don't need to. Our product itself is meaty. So I'm very clear that if a product has to be there in the market, and if it has to work for a long period of time, for some time you can get traction. But if it has to be, if people have to like it and if they have to find it healthy to be eating it regularly, you have to have a very less processed product, and you have to be very clear about what's going in your product. You cannot hide things. You cannot shove things under the carpet and say that nahi ye aisa hai waisa hai, we are doing this. You have to be very clear कि आपका प्रोसेस क्या है भाई, आपके प्रोडक्ट में जा क्या रहा है, और आपका हेल्थ न्यूट्रिशनल कंटेंट क्या है, आपको क्या मिलेगा. Very clear. And therefore I think the more clear and more open you are about what you're selling and what you're making, the more you're more likely to get the nod from the people, and people will give you another chance of trying it. So even here, if people find that your product is really healthy and taste is not that great, they will still come back to you and say आपका प्रोडक्ट अच्छा है पर थोड़ा टेस्ट में इधर आप इंप्रूव कर सकते हो, विल गिव यू अ सेकंड ट्राई. बट इफ दे फाइंड आउट कि ये प्रोडक्ट बेकार है, मतलब इट्स बैड फॉर आवर हेल्थ, इट मे बी द टेस्टिएस्ट थिंग, बट देन वो नहीं खाएंगे दूसरी बार. They'll not take the risk, because today they've seen what happens with eating unhealthy stuff and having a bad lifestyle. People are really suffering, and therefore we were born in the pandemic. So our whole concept came up in the pandemic. I started thinking of this whole idea of Wakao happened in the pandemic because I realized one very critical thing is that people are very conscious of what they're going to eat, and something that's going to last lifelong is food stuff. बाकी का सब बंद पड़ सकता है, पर खाने का जो चीज है, people don't mind paying that extra $200 if you're giving them a good product. Always remember that. However poor he may be, if you can give him something healthy and nutritional for his food at the end of the day, for his stomach and for his kids and his family, he doesn't mind spending that extra $200 or $100 for a better product which is nutritional. So I'm a strong advocate of less processed products. We should not over process them or use a lot of artificial things to get, because what is the point? You're using an artificial thing to give something to the person which is anyway in the first place the principle is artificial. So then it doesn't work. It doesn't make any good. Yeah, that's what I think.
Cool. All right. So I agree with that. I think people, or at least like you said, in the last 2 years, the understanding around health and nutrition has suddenly increased, and people are willing to pay the premium. Um, but yeah, like I said, we do a lot of cafeteria designs and everything else, right? So we also help cafeterias, and we figure out chole bhature sells the most. Nobody wants to eat the salad. Uh, everybody talks of healthy options in the cafeteria, but the salad guy is the one who runs out of business first and closes his shop and moves. So most cafeterias actually struggle to keep that one healthy option because the guy is not making enough business, right? So to some extent, I think it was still a fancy item. I think health is like, and we've seen that traditionally, you would see a lot of health food companies come up in India, mushroom about 3 years ago, but you won't find so many of them anymore. Hopefully, with the pandemic, I think the awareness has increased and things will get better and people are aware. Of course, the anecdotal evidence, and they have to finally answer it with their money. And at least whatever we see now, like you said, people are willing to pay for healthy stuff. They are willing to understand about healthier products. So I think that's overall a good sign. So uh,
And and most of now people are ready to experiment with new things. Earlier, people would not even give you a try. You wouldn't even have a chance. But today, people are ready to experiment with a new product. They are ready to pay for a new product and see कि ये क्या है क्या. पहले तो वो try भी नहीं करते थे. So today you have that one extra step, where new companies have that chance of actually giving that product and getting it tried. Like people can actually give an opinion about it. So that's a new change that has happened in the
yeah,
recent
so I
past.
think the uncertainty is catching up with everybody. So because there is so much uncertainty, I think they are all willing to kind of open up and embrace new things, right? Because of the uncertainty. So I think that's the positive side effect. Of course, there are a lot of negative ones. Uh, so moving on to some amount of transparency and naming and branding, we talked a little bit about it, saying should we call it meat or not. Now, once things come in mainstream, there is a tooth and nail fight. Soya milk, uh, dairy industry has been pushing, saying soya milk cannot be called milk, right? Because it is not milk. The ice cream industry has already kind of said that okay, you cannot call it ice cream unless it contains real cream. So they are now branded as frozen dessert. And I'm sure a similar fight will happen in the meat industry, and I'm sure the meat industry will push for distinguishing the product from real meat. So, Narendra, you've been pushing that agenda. What do you think it'll call? How do you think it'll evolve?
One second. Okay. So I must say the chickens are angry with you, Shardul. Lay off them. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Now, no, but what Shardul says is absolutely spot on, right? Regarding animal farming, what impact it's having on the planet. But one has to remember that there is room for everybody. Okay, I don't think the meat industry is looking at the plant protein or plant. I continue to call it plant protein. I will not call it plant meat because it's sort of like an oxymoron. Doesn't work in my head, right? So plant protein, we don't see, a threat from the plant protein. It is another alternative to the consumers. That's all it is, right? And I wish that the see look, the plant protein as an ingredient is an amazing thing. It's fantastic. You can upcycle a simple product like ragi, the pulses, the millets. Farmer incomes can go up. It is brilliant. Okay, and this product makes it happen. But I only feel that when you actually say that this particular product is a substitute to something else, you're demeaning it, in my opinion. Call the product for what what it is, make products out of it, bring it to market, give it the due respect is my feeling around it. And I don't see the market for protein, meat, animal protein is so large in India. It is so large and growing at such a big clip that I don't think the meat industry is going to have a problem like the dairy industry or any of those other industries, right? That's my take on it. I play a certain role in a couple of the industry organizations like Karnataka Poultry Farmers Breeders Association, and we are also part of the Compound Livestock Feed Manufacturers Association of India. Very rich heritage in that sector, right? So everything has to be given its due. We don't see this. It's another alternative for the consumer, and if it is positioned appropriately, it will work. It is here to stay. It is all about positioning. It is all about making products out of it, giving its due. I would hate to see plant protein products living in the shadow of meat. Meat. No, we are an alternative to meat. No, you are not an alternative to meat. You are a different ingredient, and a high quality ingredient that is bringing so much more value into the lives of non-vegetarians as well as vegetarians who don't want to eat meat 4 times a week, and they want to shift from 4 to 3 and give that one time to alternative meat. So I'm a big believer, and ultimately what happens is, whether it is antibiotics or industrial farming or any of those things, right? Companies have to get, there's going to be a market for everything. Okay, there's going to be, if you don't do industrial farming, you can't feed this large of a population with animal protein. It's not possible. But companies have to get conscious about how they do it. At Nandu's, all our broilers are grown cage free. Okay, where we have to become sustainable. We as a company have subscribed that we will get sustainable. All our chicken litter is not left to rot, which produces methane. We bring it, we compost it. We use it for agriculture in our farms. We grow organic veggies that goes back to feed the staff, on the farm, right? So companies have to start paying attention to these things. It's not about a sustainable production. It's about sustainable practices for production, because the population is going to be big, and you can't go back to organic. You can't go to chickens, being brought up in backyards. That's never going to fit the market. So it's about traceability, transparency, accountability. Companies have to be held accountable. Okay. At Nandu's, all of our farms are open for anybody to come and see, experience what we do, keep us accountable. And in fact, we have gone one step ahead, and we have created a position of a sustainability engineer. It's a new position that we have created, and this person, he has a master's in sustainability from Copenhagen. He has to vet every single process that is put into place in the organization, whether it is packaging for Nandu's, or whether it is waste disposable for Nandu's, or the production of broilers at Nandu's. Everything is run by him. We certify it, and we do the best we can to make it as sustainable as possible. So, that's all. I think individual companies are the ones who are going to be responsible. If you don't, if the law doesn't keep you responsible, customers will keep you responsible going forward. Okay. So, that's something somebody has to keep in mind. But
Yes.
there's room for everyone and everything. It's a very massive market. Hey, I want to have jackfruit burger on the on the Nandu's platform ASAP, man. So so that's what it is, right? So
Cool. So I think we can continue to call it mock meat for some more time, is what I hear. There is no real threat, and I agree. I think why should a fantastic category like that be in the shadow of another category? And we had this internal discussion: should we even call it mock meat? And there were some messages going back and forth. But the unfortunate thing is that is the only kind of a plant-based protein is a super complex term, right? For a consumer, it's a very, very, I don't know, probably engineers understand it, but the consumers are kind of lost. So we probably have to come up with something that is short, that is crisp, maybe like surf, which replaced the word detergent. I don't know, but something we have to come up with that will convey the idea more succinctly than it is doing right now, right? So moving from branding onto the regulatory part, and it's a completely new category of product. The regulator is also looking at it. There have been no major regulations published yet on what to call it, what it cannot be called, what ingredient, what you can do, what you cannot do. Shardul, from your side, any insight? I know you work with the regulator as well, being a not-for-profit. What kind of regulations do you expect to show up?
Sure. So we advise a lot of stakeholders involved in some of this ecosystem, and like I said, right, globally, this product is being. So let's just talk about plant-based meat, because as we understand throughout the whole, why, it's kind of unjustified, because plant-based meat, fermentation derived meat, and cultivated meat or cell cultured, very different concepts altogether, right? So different regulations, different aspects associated to it. So let's just stick to plant-based meat. I think in all the countries that it's being sold, so it uses, ingredients like lentils, pulses, chickpea. All of these are plant ingredients which have been approved and regulated for decades now. So largely, there's nothing novel about it. It's just, putting together by processing. And to earlier point as well, right, about some of the, so I'm a food scientist. I hear a lot of these misconceptions all the time, sometimes about over processing or processing as a technique. So for example, dose toxicity, Ramesh, you being a food consultant, and a lot of our audience today being food technologists, know that it's largely about dose and toxicity, right? As long as it's permitted to be healthy. And there are a bunch of other things. So for example, you can over process. So I was actually Googling this term, uber processing or over processing. It has to do with technology. So for example, let's consider milk and pasteurization, right? That's a technology there which makes milk safe. We kind of all agree on it. For decades, we've agreed on it. But now, for example, high pressure processing came, which preserves the nutrients. It's processing, it's additional steps, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of engineering, but no chemicals are being laden. So not necessarily that something's over processed means it's laden with chemicals. That's first clarification. The second is you have novel ways of processing like texturization. So for example, plant-based meats, a lot of audience might be thinking who does not know how these are made. It's made by extrusion. Extrusion is a shear force process mainly, right? It's the texture you get out of these plant protein concentrates or isolates. So not necessarily that you're making this meat by some crazy, over processing technology. It's extrusion. All of our namkeen, all of our kurkure, all of our snacks are made like that. And Indians consume a lot of it. And by the way, everything's lab made. Almost everything is lab made. So that term is also pretty tricky for me. I'm sure a lot of people who are food technologists on board who are doing new product development, all of them are being made in lab. Almost all of the new product development works in lab. So everything's lab made. So that's another way of kind of really not understanding how much the category of chemicals could be. Again, I'm all up for less processing and more cleaner labels personally as well. And I think industry comes there at stages. So when you're starting out a sector, entrepreneurs need to get some sources of revenue in. They start out with a product and with version 2, version 3, as we've seen globally. So that's the whole point, right? The end goal is to create economies of scale. And at that economies of scale, we have tons of models and a lot of real-time data. Like for example, Impossible, Beyond, today morning, I was reading about a couple more other companies which have slashed their price. Now they are at price parity, almost 10% extra. So a lot of these concerns, right, that it's going to be 4 times, 5 times expensive. People are not going to be able to eat it. So for example, Impossible Burger Patty is like 20% more premium. Beyond is only 10% more premium than a hamburger patty in the US, a 6-pack of it. So largely, so the better thing is you can make some of these products actually better. Plant-based meat. You can have more complex carbohydrates, which you're never going to get from animals. You can have some more changes in the processing as well, where you can reduce some of the trans fats, etc., etc. So that's an overall point about earlier. But having said that, I think all of our regulators have been processing a lot of plant-based foods across our country. There's a lot of food innovation. Plant-based meat fits very well into it. For fermentation and for cultivated meat, eggs and dairy, there's going to be some, for example, Singapore became the first country anywhere in the world in this December to launch a cultivated meat product. Directly, you can deliver it from an app. You can get it home delivered. And it's obviously a developed country. They think a lot about citizen safety, public health. So they have approved it for sale. Similarly, many other countries are in pipeline to do it. Plant-based meat is obviously being sold in so many countries all over the world, whether it's Southeast Asia, North America, Africa, European countries, and all of their respective bodies have been regulating it. So I don't see major challenges for plant-based meat in India. There's going to be slight learning curve and expert opinions to be taken for fermentation so that there's better regulation, because there's going to be species, there's going to be cell lines, stuff like that. And again, that's in slightly distant future for a country like India. Plant-based meat is happening right now. Yeah.
Great. So if you are listening in and you want to start something on it, from what I hear, right now is the best time. So you have time to learn and you have time to experiment and try new things. So I think Shardul and GFI are a good partner in that they support a lot of those activities. So you can connect back with us and Shardul, and then we can do the connect also if required. Continuing with like the product characteristics. So one of the things that we've been seeing, the plant-based protein or the vegetarian food, if I may call it that way, uh, tends to have a lot longer shelf life, or at least I know some of the products from Workout claim to have a 1-year shelf life. Now, one is how do you say that it is not really processed, or you don't add preservatives, so how do you kind of maintain those shelf lives? Number two, has there been any study on the degradation of the nutrition value? Because as product stays uh, in a packed state for a longer time, that's another thing that's of concern. So Sairaj, you have any data on that?
So what we do is we like I mentioned earlier, our process is called the retort packaging. So it's a heating process. So the whole concept is very simple. The product is put in packets. These are retortable plastic bags. They're sealed. These are very high quality packets. And then there is a heat of almost 120 degrees. That's it. That's applied to these packets for almost say between 20 to 40 minutes, depending on what is the product and what kind of R&D we have for that particular product. And and that's it. So what it does is it kills all the bacteria which are inside, and the packet being so high quality, there's no new bacteria that can enter. So there is no multiplication or growth of new bacteria, and that gives it a shelf life. Simple. We don't need any refrigeration also for it. It's a simple technology with a lot of companies are doing in different ways. Now, when you cook your food, normal cooking also is cooked in a normal vessel. You cook at more than 200 degrees. So if the degradation of what would happen while cooking is that much, it's much lesser than that. That actually that happens in our process and the process that we undertake. So when you cook in a metal thing, it goes to more than 700 degrees. It becomes very hot. So what we through our processes, we've tried to reduce the degradation to as much as possible. For sure, there will be some level of degradation if you are going to give a shelf life. So our product normally has a shelf life. You can go up to 18 months if it is kept in the right condition, in under right temperatures and all. It can still go up to around 18 months. We claim we keep it at 12 months, which is very conservative. Now, when you open the product also, it's like any other meat. Once you open it, use it for some time, and you put it in a freezer, it can still be used for another 20 days because the bacteria are paused once it's in the freezer. It does not multiply and the food doesn't get degraded. So what I feel is like Shardul said, there are certain things which are accepted by law. There are certain technologies, certain procedures that are accepted, and we all need to work within the realms of those procedures and those technologies. And as an entrepreneur, see, I'm a lawyer by education. I'm not a food technologist. But what we've done is we've got on board people who are like Shardul, who are people who are qualified in that. So I believe in one thing: you cannot be a master of all. You have to have the right people working with you. You have to have the right team. So when we get in experts to give us that, we give them a brief. A brief is simple, that this has to be less processed. We need to keep it as natural as possible. So I keep repeating, and that is our motto: to keep jackfruit as natural as possible without tempering too much with its natural qualities, because its natural qualities are what makes it a hero. We don't temper with it. It is naturally a hero. So as far as the degradation of nutrients is concerned, we try to keep it at the lowest level. And like Naren said, our whole technology is very open. We are ready to speak and show it to people, and they can also evaluate others. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think we've exceeded time, but I'm assuming we can extend a little more. I have like a barge of questions, so I still want to cover some of them. And before that, my last question to Naren, again around product shelf life. Now, one of the challenges with meat has been the short shelf life of the product, right? Saying, okay, it has to be fresh. So people worry a lot about fresh. I'm sure they wouldn't worry so much about if you say protein based, whatever, plant based protein. They already know that it is not going to be a fresh product. But if you're selling meat, then you're talking about there is freshness, there's limited shelf life, there is supply chains. So do you think that will become an impediment in kind of and I know you said that you're not competing in the same market, but just assuming that someday you will kind of overlap, right? So in that sense, do you think that will become an impediment for the meat industry?
Yeah, well, actually, with or without plant protein, the supply chain for meat has always been a challenge, right? We do fresh chilled meat, which means the animal is processed in a slaughterhouse, And one slaughterhouse, usually the place where it enters and the way and the place where it comes out are at different temperature zones altogether, right? We've been processing meat for more than 20 years now, and it's like our second religion for me. Now, when you maintain this protocol and ensure that the meat that is coming out at the end of the factory in the packaging area is at 0 to 4 degrees centigrade. The core temperature of the meat has to be 0 to 4 degrees centigrade. And if that core temperature of 0 to 4 is maintained until the meat is cooked, then there's a shelf life that we can look at as long as 5 days. Okay, so at Nandu's, what we do, we ensure we have veterinarians and we have certified quality assurance officers that ensure that the bird that is coming into the slaughterhouses, we do a lot of quality checks before even we take it in. Okay, some technical veterinary terms, and there's a veterinarian there who looks at it. We take in good, healthy birds into processing first. Secondly, when it comes out into the packaging hall, the core temperature is maintained at 0, and such product at 0 to 4 degrees centigrade is conveyed to our retail outlets in a reefer truck. And all of our reefer trucks are IoT enabled, so that we know how many times the driver has opened the door, what has been the temperature of the product in its journey from the factory to the store. And at the store, we again store it in a chiller, which ensures we maintain it from 0 to 4. Okay. Now, a large part of India thinks that if the chicken is cold, it is frozen. Actually, it's a misnomer. It's very misunderstood. There's frozen chicken is completely different. Chilled chicken is completely different. Meat has to be chilled. If you find your meat warm, then the degradation process already started. Okay. So therefore, a lot of questions we answer when people come and say, hey man, that next door chicken shop, the fellow will cut and give me, it'll be warm and nice. I say, the way he cuts it, the way he gives it, it's already decaying already. So this is how meat is supposed to be eaten. Please trust us and try this. So this cold chain is the only way that we ensure, shelf life for our product. Again, that is for fresh meats. When it comes to value-added products, all of our value-added products, be it chicken 65, Rayalaseema chicken, or burger patty, or the cold cuts that we have, they're all blast frozen. So if you actually blast freeze the produce, and it's our value system and our commitment to the consumer that we don't use any taste enhancers, no coloring agents, all natural. Okay. In fact, our sausages have the highest meat content in the industry, as high as close to 75% of leg and breast boneless meat. Okay, so the quality of the ingredient, the quality of the freezing technology again gives it a shelf life. And when the product is blast frozen, blast freezing is a process where you actually put it in a blast freezer and take the core temperature down to -40 over a 6 to 8 hour period, and then you shift it and store it at -18 in the freezer until the customer picks it up from our store, takes it home, puts it in the freezer, and then he can consume. So there's a 1 year shelf life on blast frozen produce as well. Again, the shelf life is all contingent on how the cold chain is maintained. If the customer takes it home and leaves it on the countertop for a few hours and then puts it in the freezer, it is bound to spoil, right? Then again, there are technologies such as what Sairaj was saying. In fact, my first food company was all about retard products. I developed 25 different retard products like dal makhani, Avadi biryani, and Andhra chili chicken. So retarting is a fantastic, chemical-free, preservative-free form of technology. In fact, it is, you can license it from DRDO. That is what our Jawans are eating on the front lines, right? So there are technologies and there are value systems in an organization. Both when they come together, you can create products which is safe for humans to consume. Okay, and we are all about that. We are all about that. I personally head product development, and one of the targets for me is, my food technologies come back and I said, there's no umami in this, man. He says, sir, I have to add MSG for umami. I said, no MSG, figure out another way of getting it right, you know. So it goes back to the organization. It goes back to the values of the organization, the technology. And certainly consumers need not worry when you are associated with the right brand, with the right values, using the right technology, they will deliver shelf life to you. Okay. Nothing to be concerned on that front.
So a very good way to kind of uh, wrap up saying, I think finally what matters is the person who's selling this to you, right? As in,
Absolutely. Yeah.
if they are honest, they are transparent, like you said, it's traceable, they are open. Um, I think yes, shelf life is just one such ingredient, and we have lots and lots of questions. So I'll switch quickly to the first one. The question is from Flora, and it says, any restrictions for export on plant-based proteins from India to Singapore? Shardul, you have an answer, or anybody has an answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I know Flora, so we're working with some of that. But essentially, yeah, there are some, export import. Those are major issues sometimes. For example, if you want to import some stuff, there are a lot of duties, added taxes, which is why sometimes entrepreneurs find it tricky. So one good example here for everybody in the audience who might be thinking about plant proteins is currently almost majority of our plant protein is soy isolates and concentrates that is needed for product development in our sector. All of these other biodiverse crops, there's a huge white space. So it's a big B2B. Having said that, there are some exports are relatively much easier depending on which zone you're in. If you're in an export zone, if you're close to ports, I think businesses find it relatively much easier to export it to other countries. So largely, I don't see a lot of problems with exports. Mainly, there are some concerns with duties, but I think Sairaj, yeah, can add to it.
So exports is a huge market. So we've already sent samples to US, we sent samples to Israel, Singapore. In fact, we've sent Flora. We'll be happy to connect with you. We've sent to the UK. US by the end of this month, early next week, we should be selling in the US, which would be a good thing for us. But every place has different restrictions and different permissions that you require for certain things, and it's easily doable. A lot of our companies, like Shardul mentioned, Good Dot has a huge expanse internationally also, and it's very nice and it's very heartening to see our own fellow companies going all over, and there is so much space. When you say exports, I feel the sky is the limit. There are so many countries in the world and everyone wants a piece of this. So make in India and take it. So our whole concept at Wakao is take jackfruit from our backyards to the world, because it's quite literally grown in our backyard. I have a jackfruit tree in my house. So that is the concept, and we are working really hard towards it. Exports is a big market, and we Indians have to take our stuff out. I completely believe in that.
Okay. And if I may take this opportunity to pitch in, as in we do help with regulatory, both for imports and exports. So if anybody in the audience requires help with the regulatory in terms of packaging, labeling, like I think Sairaj said, it's very, very country specific. So we do work with a lot of countries in exports. So yeah, we could help with that. The next question is from Harish Rao, and his question is, what is the biological value of plant-based meat? Is it the same as animal meat? And I'm not a food technologist, so I will not claim expertise on biological value.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I can send a lot of literature, so it depends, right, on which ingredients you're using, what's the ultimate so there's no one category, which is the problem with using ingredients as a way of going on about it, right? Because it has to be a larger umbrella. Within it, you can use 100 different crops to make plant-based meat, but every time you start saying it's millet, it's just a which are the problems, which is why I think a lot of research shows and a lot of consumer studies, opinion, stakeholder polls also show that it's plant-based meat. But I think for BV value, I'm happy to send a lot of literature depending on how it can be calculated to the audience. You can write, I'll drop my email ID in the chat, and the concerned person can write to me.
Right. So Harish, you can reach out to us, and then we'll be happy to connect you with Shardul and also share the literature that he shares with us. Okay. Again, another question from Harish, but I think we more or less answer it. How would plant-based meat be called meat, as it is not animal source? So I think we beat that topic to death. So we'll not go back to that. We also, I think Jaydeep Singh has a question, and it's about sustainability and filtering the nutrition via animal bodies inefficient. I think we covered enough of that. Anybody would like to add anything?
I can quickly add 2 points to both of these questions, right? You have to understand what is meat. Meat is bunch of carbohydrates, especially food technologists, scientists, anybody who studied a lot of this would understand in the audience that it's just a bunch of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, minerals put together by nature through the process of evolution, right? Those same elements and protein sources, like there's a common argument that the protein is more bioavailable, or there's a richer source of protein in animals. Not necessarily. You can use processing techniques which are not necessarily laden with chemicals, cleaner labels, to get that value of protein. And at the same time, that's why at the end of the day, you're taking plant proteins or fermentation derived proteins, or proteins manufactured through cells, or biomasses fermentation, precision fermentation, etc., and you can put it together to essentially create meat products. So that was the answer for that. And the later one was about efficiencies, right? So I think we covered something. I'll just quickly add, for the larger goal here is to kind of help understand that if 100 calories are going into producing food, 1 calorie is coming out in case of beef. In case of chicken, it's 10:1. In case of pig, it's 10:1. For some animals, it's in that range, depending on what animals meat you're consuming. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next question from Suzu Agro: what's the shelf life of Wakao products? I think we covered that. We said 1 year and sometimes up to 1.5 years. It could go up to 1.5 years, but you guys mark it as 1 year. So that is covered. Another question from Amardeep: why people choose mock meats coming to the cost effectiveness? So it's definitely not very cost effective at the moment. So why would somebody choose mock meat at the moment? So anybody wants to take that?
I can quickly answer that. Over the past 3 years, I've seen this entire landscape evolve, and even globally since I was tracking it since 2014, when I was, doing my internship in the US, for example. So I saw some of these things, and I understood that early adopter cohorts are very important. The point we made, right? Those are the ones who are going to buy a product initially. We are not talking about the entire tier 2, tier 3 bottom of pyramid market here. So ultimately, depending on all the advantages you get, for the choice you're making, I think consumer pays little premium. But like we said, taste, price, and convenience. In fact, in that order, are only three things matter. Everything else, health, sustainability concerns, come after that. And a lot of studies have shown that. But essentially, if you price something like 50% premium and it's not tasting the same, nobody's going to buy it, no matter which source is going to come from. So definitely, the smaller set of market who are early adopters, like in mobile phones or any other new technology, right? People will pay a premium for mobile phones initially, and then the mobile phones become cheaper. So it's exactly similar. With economies of scale, it's going to be at price parity, like we're already seeing, like my answer earlier said, about a lot of global companies slashing down their prices to tap into that price parity.
So we don't believe in pricing a product high. I don't believe that our product needs to be priced high. Our product is priced right. So when I'm selling, why am I jackfruit product is a little more expensive than going and buying a jackfruit from the market, is because we are solving two big problems. So I'll just spend 2 minutes on explaining that. So one is that jackfruit, if someone who's cooked jackfruit will know that cutting open a jackfruit and cleaning it and getting it ready for cooking itself is a 2-hour process. So a lot of chefs from 5-star hotels say that, Sairaj, you saved our man time from 2 hours to 10 minutes. We are giving you a ready product. You just cut open the packet, put it in the curry. It's ready. You can then make your curry out of it. You save so much time. That's one. And the second thing is jackfruit is considered to be a seasonal product. So which you get it for almost 5 months a year, you won't get jackfruit. Now what we've done is we are giving you jackfruit 365 days a year. So that's another thing that we saw. And the whole chain which is there, the whole good practices that we follow, for all of this that we give you, it's not an expensive product. It may be more expensive than chicken, but it is definitely cheaper than beef. It's definitely cheaper than the high expensive meats that you get. And Shardul is very correct that we need to target the right audience. The TG is critical. I'm not going to go with my product into a village and try and sell jackfruit to them because they can't afford it. They'll be happier to pick it and cut it for 2 hours and then eat it. So that's the thing. We need to be very clear of who we are selling our product to and what value addition it's bringing to their life. If that is then, if you can establish that, people don't mind paying for it.
Great. Naren, you wanted to add something?
No, I think, see, the thing is, for poultry to produce at, the cost of productions that we have today, it has taken 60 years. Okay. It takes a long time for something to evolve, get economies of scale, etc. And today, the poultry industry, we have the highest cost of ingredients in the world, but we still produce at the lowest price. Now that happens because of economies of scale and everything else, process efficiencies, etc., etc., that builds into the system at some point in time in the evolution. Now, I would say that the plant protein business is in the very early stages, and they will see economies of scale with adoption happening, exports happening. That will come in. That will absolutely come in at some point in time, and then when you get economies of scale, price parity will automatically come into picture.
Fair point. The next question is from Mr. Gupta, and his question is, does retorting food impact nutritional value and final products? I think we covered that a little bit, saying retorting is probably one of the most non-invasive kind of processes and tends to retain most of the nutrition value. Of course, any kind of processing does change it a little bit, but it's the most non-invasive process that we may have. Another question from Preeti, why plant-based meats is not a popular and less available on the Indian market shelves as frozen meat products? And I think Naren answered that question a little bit, saying as we evolve, the industry is just about starting. So we will get there, and you guys can add.
Yeah, my thought on that is, the frozen value-added meat product segment itself in India today is, I suspect to be around 1,200 crores per annum. That's it. Okay. And that has taken a long time to come. It needs marketing, money for marketing, money for listing, and money for promotions. So there's a lot that goes into making a product available in the shelf and sustainably. Because most modern trade today is not about retailing produce. It's about selling space. For them, it's a real estate business, right? So the products have to have margin. Products have to have enough money to promote the product. So we need solid money, venture money to come in to the food space. To make this happen, and that's happening in the meat space right now. We have seen the funding, even Nandu's, we are in the process of raising funding. We have got a lot of inbound inquiries. So everything has to come of age, and then it will happen. But meanwhile, what we have found very interesting is the D2C, the e-commerce, the D2C growth of that is happening at such a fast clip today, right? So, Sairaj sitting in Goa is able to send me, jackfruit burgers tomorrow. I can find him. I can discovery has become so easy, and that's one way that you can short circuit it. You may not find it in supermarket shelves. In fact, Nandu's, we are not available in supermarket shelves because the cost of operating there is ridiculous. We want to give great produce, but we don't want to engineer the produce to meet the margins. That is a crime. Right? So D2C, and a lot of these companies are going the D2C route, and you can find them online. You can absolutely find them online.
So what, I keep saying this. I keep saying that it is just the tip of the iceberg. We've just arrived. We are in a virgin territory, nascent stage, and there is so much to climb. Like Naren saying, those have been businesses which have been there forever. So now when I keep saying that a lot of our budgets are going into education, I keep saying that ours is like an invention. Making products out of jackfruit and in such an avatar is an invention. So we have to go city to city to educate people. I'm trying to get people to understand what this concept is, what is the taste. And that's why I said the times are nice that people are even experimenting and giving us a try. So it will take time. It will take time. We are the first movers right now. We are the only company in India who does this. And we know that we have a task, and we have tomorrow someone may come, they'll get a platter where we've done all the hard work of trying and educating people. But we are okay with that. We are on a mission, and we think that we have a great product, and we need people to know about it, and we need people to try it. And therefore, it will take time, but we have to keep at it. We have to keep trying. Yeah.
Just kind of rounding this out, like I said, right? In the 3 years that I've been active, from 2 companies, we've come to dozens of companies. So the question itself is a little tricky. You can go online right now and, go to different websites of startups and order stuff, at least in metro cities. Smaller cities haven't still started to see, like others said, it's a function of maturity, and over time, a lot more companies which replicate the taste, which are price parity, over a few years would come into the market. And I think many people will have plethora of options, and your favorite meat, whether it's, and the product market fit is super important, like everybody said. D2C is what people are doing right now after pandemic, but product market fit, shami kebabs, galati kebabs, biryani meat, everything that we eat, it's not about burgers anymore. It's just a small category in India. Everything else is well, right? Nuggets and burgers are going to be key drivers initially for the early adopter cohort, because that's the snacking category which is most growing. But other than that, to tap into the larger market, you definitely have to account for the local product market fit. Yeah.
Right. And we can say that some of the inventory that you have to manage to put it on retail shelves is not easy. We work with a lot of
I don't know. I'm struggling. And the listing charges, the the payment. I don't know whether we'll even survive if we can do that. It's like
correct.
very
So
difficult.
if there is anybody from the retail network, organized retail as they call themselves, I think one of the things that they really need to look at is, if they want innovative and new products, they really have to improve.
So like we are bootstrapped. Yeah, we can't be spending lakhs of rupees on giving listing charges. No, the day we get funded, maybe then we'll have that kind of expanse that we can go. But how can we? If like I want to reach in Bangalore, if I want to reach in a place, if I want to be in 10 outlets or 20 outlets and let people come and try the product, eat, I'm happy to give you a margin. But then if you say पहले दिन पे आप 2 लाख रुपया दो और फिर मैं 30 दिन के बाद आपको पेमेंट दूंगा, वो भी जो बिकेगा उस पे, becomes very.
और 3 महीना का इन्वेंटरी रखो, माय शेल्फ शुड नॉट गो एम्प्टी, राइट? वो मेरे
Right.
दुकान में वेयर हाउस में रखो, सो दैट my store does not look empty. So yeah,
That's
there
okay.
are
That's a
challenges
business model also, but it doesn't work for startups and for a new product like this.
No, Cyrus, that's where we went with the omni-channel strategy, right? We said we want to create a direct connect with the consumer. We have close to about 300,000 customers on our platform today, and we have been doubling our revenues without the use of modern trade. In fact, we got invited to be in one of the modern trades, and on our terms. But even on our terms, the margin is so tight. It is difficult, right? Then as entrepreneurs, what happens? You want to re-engineer product. It's like, engineer your product to fit the market. That is a very toxic situation to be in. It challenges your values, it challenges your principles. And we said, no, we're not going to do it. We are going to develop products like this. And this is the margin we can give you. You like it? Fine. Otherwise, I have my D2C channel. See, technology is the way to go forward. You have to remove the middleman. You have to get D2C, because the ecosystem is. See, I started my first food company in 2005 when I came back from the US. That's when I used retard technology. And the only option there was retail. I put it in more Spencer's and everybody else. And all the money was spent on only promoting, run this promotion, put this poster, pay him there, pay him this, pay him that. That's just the nature of that industry, right? But fast forward to the 2010s plus, you don't have to go to these guys. There are marketplaces. We are the largest seller of meat on Swiggy and Zomato and Dunzo. And that happens because you put all of your money in building a brand, and then you create a pull from the retailers, and all these margins on our terms. Look, I mean, it is my product, my price. It's as simple as that. And technology make that happen, Siraj. More than happy to talk to you about this, but you got a great product. There's tech there for you. This is the age of entrepreneurship. You don't have to cut off all the middlemen and go direct to the consumer.
So what I can say is, you can take a guy out of technology, but not a technology out of the guy, right? Naren still talks about technology even after doing food for so many years. Achha, the next one is from Sarthak Rastogi. So
Food is the
shout out.
technology.
Sorry?
Ramesh.
Sarthak
Food is the
was
technology.
I know. I'm sorry. I get beaten up for that, but let's call it computer technology or information technology or whatever else. In India, it seems analogous. And yeah, I get beaten up quite a bit for that. So another one is from Sarthak Rastogi. So shout out to Wakao Foods. He says, I can first-hand testify Wakao burgers patties are amazing. So congratulations. So that's the feedback first-hand coming from the conversation from Sarthak. And probably the last question we will take is from Shambhavi. So there were this generation when spirulina, algae, and all those protein supplements were being made. Uh, where are those and how do they compare? And uh, I think a little bit about the bioavailability of the proteins from those sources versus the newer sources that we are pitching in. Who wants to take it?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'll add to that question. In fact, algal protein from algal sources is one of the things that we were exploring for as a source of protein for animal industry. But I think it's at the moment, I think it is quite expensive and it's a very delicate process. Algae grows in nature plenty, but then when you want to farm it, it's a tough one to do, right? So perhaps that's the reason why we haven't seen much investments around that area in India. But there are a few international companies that are making that happen. But it's much slower than all the other protein sources that we have seen come along. I don't know. I think Shardul.
Yeah. I'd love to add to this. So we recently did a very intense study with a lot of stakeholders, entrepreneurs, scientists, policymakers, a bunch of global tech companies. We've published a strategic analysis paper report, which is 40, 50 pages, 60, 70 pages long, but pretty deep, insightful about algae and its use as a source of alternative protein. So all of that is available on our website. So I'll encourage everybody for everything, like all the reports I mentioned, you can just go to our websites, and I think Ramesh would be able to send you those after the session to the registered attendees.
Sure, and I think we can share it right away also on the channels that we are on. So we've gone quite a bit over. So we were supposed to finish at 12:15, but we are at 12:50. But I'm sure it was very informative, as in I really enjoyed it. We used to do 1 hour conversation, and then we moved to like a 75 minutes conversation, and I'm thinking the next one we'll have to do a 90-minute conversation. We seem to exceed every time. So at least to set better expectations, I'm sure we'll allocate more time. So with that, I think it's time around to wrap up. So a quick 30-second wrap up, Shardul, from your side.
Sure. I mean, I've seen many technologies which are novel, which are kind of being applied for making the world a better place, especially in food sector as well. I have never seen so much impedance behind one specific technology, right? There are many things: cold atmospheric plasma processing, high pressure processing. There's, our technology. So it's exponentially scalable technology. That's the first thing that most people who want to get involved in this should understand. It's definitely going to be the future. Like, I have worked on both sides, right? I've worked in the meat industry. I've worked on all sides. I've worked with startups, tribals in Orissa to kind of set up backward integration of meat products. And having decided all of this, I kind of figured this would be the most sustainable path forward for producing the kind of protein and calorie needs we have. So yeah, that's one thought I want to leave everybody with, especially because the audience was largely food industry and food technology specific. So, if you're wanting to make careers in the space, we have tons of career guidance, consulting guidance, market research guidance on all the things we've discussed today, tons of white papers, a lot of data. All of this is available for free on our website. So feel free to take a look. So we are a non-profit, so we work with every stakeholder on an open access information basis, at least when it's externally facing stakeholder resources like white papers, industry reports, and market reports. So all of it's available on our YouTube channels, and feel free to take a look and connect with us for more.
Great. I'm sure it will be useful. Sairaj, your last 30 seconds. Parting
Thank
shot.
you, Ramesh, for this opportunity. I feel that we are in a new territory. We are in a new trajectory. And there's so much to explore. There's so many more people to meet, so much more to give to people. And we've set out on this mission of taking this one fruit, which we feel is a super fruit of the world and has so much of greatness associated with it. So our mission is to take it to every person in India. And on the way, we are collaborating with as many people as we get. And I'd just like to also mention our accelerators, Huddle. They have also been very close. Our consultants who have worked with us, We have a big team which is working on this mission, and I'm always on the lookout to meet more people, collaborate with more people. I'll be speaking more with Shardul and Narendra also, because there's so much more to learn from everybody, and we have to take our Indian products to the world. Thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that is need of the hour, and we are with you on that journey. As
Thank you.
in both, I said from my side farm interests, I think jackfruit is a fantastic product. And in the world of agriculture, we say people measure productivity in acreages, but with jackfruit, we go three dimension, right? So the tree is there. So the amount we can produce is is much higher than a grain or a pulse or anything like
Yes.
that. I think that's my
400,
personal
400 tons of jackfruit being made every year.
right.
400 tons. And
Yeah,
it's being wasted. I don't think even 10% is being used.
yeah. No, I'm
So
a
much.
big fan. I'm a big fan of jackfruit. Primarily, like I said, it helps us grow three dimensionally, right, vertically. So that's to me that's the only way we can feed the world, not through uh, rice and wheat. So to me, that's a key ingredient. So fantastic, and I'm also passionate about taking products to the world.
Let's
Why
talk.
should we
Let's
be
talk. Let's talk.
yeah? Why should we sit around and drink stupid sodas, right? I don't want to name them,
Sure.
but we'll give a healthy thing. We've given a lot of good stuff to the world, so we should give some more good stuff. And last but not least, Naren, your 30 seconds.
Yeah, couple of tidbits from my journey as an entrepreneur. I failed twice before, so now when I look back, the dots will connect. So live in the moment, do what you're supposed to do, because few years from now, all of that will make sense. And whatever you do, live by your values. Customers will aim for customers to validate your vision. Don't worry about investors validating your business. That will happen automatically when customers validate your vision. And those value systems are very critical. There are moments where you get challenged on those values and you want to bend those values for the market. Please don't do that, because your customer is the one who's putting food on the table for you, and he really appreciates what you're doing. So that's my take on the whole journey of being an entrepreneur.
And no better words than those to kind of close this conversation, saying uh, customer is the value, right? So it doesn't matter where. So if the customer likes your product, everybody else is secondary, and then uh, they are seeing, they watch you. We may think that they don't watch, but they are watching you and judging you every day with every bite that they take. They are judging you, and you have to come ready on every. So like in Hindi they say, right, with every bite khara utarna hai. So I think as long as we are focused on that, things will continue to evolve and move forward. So with that, I want to close this discussion. It was a pleasure having such a heartening discussion. I think one of the things we've loved about all our food safety conversations, and this is the 12th. So we started it last year on World Food Safety Day. That was our first. The next one is going to be next month, again coinciding with World Food Safety Day. One of the things we've liked is such candid conversations we've had, as in nobody has really worried about acha this that showcasing, no, nothing. It's been very candid, and I have done some of those conversations. I really loved it. Today was another fantastic one. I did one last month, and that was another fantastic one. So I'm glad that I did this. So thanks to Surbi. I hope she gets well soon. And I want to thank Shardul, so taking out the time. Sairaj, I'm sure you have a lot of work to do, but thank you for taking out the time. I'm sure gives a lot of insights. And Naren, of course, taking out the time and doing our last minute catch for us. So thank you so much for that. And before we start wrapping up a little bit, I want to say about ourselves. So we are a food consulting company on a mission to keep food safe for human consumption. So we are on that mission. This is our monthly webinar that we run with entrepreneurs, with stakeholders, with regulators, and anybody who fits into who we think will bring insights into the industry. You can share your feedback with us at feedback@foodsafetyworks.in. if there are topics that the audience would like us to cover, you can send them in as well. You can stay updated with our webinars. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Um, of course, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Uh, like I said, we're really passionate about spreading the idea of food safety and making sure the customers and our uh, everybody else is aware of what is going on and what they need to know. So we do share regularly a newsletter, news and insights. So we send out a weekly insights, which goes out, and you can subscribe to that. As a company, we are committed to sharing knowledge and providing end-to-end solutions on food safety. Um, we do a lot of online trainings now that we are in COVID situation, but we haven't stopped our journey on that. So a lot of online trainings. We are an FSSAI training partner, FOSTAC. As per FSSAI, we are doing one on advanced HACCP uh, this Friday. So yeah, lots of knowledge sharing that we do. So please continue to stay tuned. And of course, I told a little bit, 7th June is World Food Safety Day, and we've planned a series of activities, so you can stay tuned. We want to use that time to create awareness about food safety. So we'll have week-long activities, so stay tuned. And if you are a company, a food technologist, looking for solutions, then do check out our website to see how we can help you in your journey for health, safety, and food. And I'm sure you know our website. It's foodsafetyworks.com. And while you are there, you can subscribe to the newsletter. So thank you once again for joining. Have a good rest of the day. Stay safe. Hopefully, we are over the worst of times, but there's so much uncertainty. We really don't know. So makes sense to be extra cautious, extra safe. And we look forward to seeing all of you again and continue the discussion on other channels and forums. And if you ever have anything for us, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ramesh. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.